Well. Welcome into the Mountaineer Postgame Show. I'm Schuyler Callihan, and this is just unbelievable. West Virginia finds a way to knock off the number 3 team in the country, the Gonzaga Bulldogs, in just game number 5 in the Darren DeVries era. Truly unbelievable. What an effort from the Mountaineers today. Got to say, I called it. If you go back and look at my score prediction, I had this one. I had this one down to a T. Okay, maybe I did. I actually had the Mountaineers losing by maybe a shade under a million in this one. And hey, I'm hats off to Darren, hats off to the guys on this team. Completely proved me and probably a lot of people wrong. I mean, if we're just going to be completely honest here, by show of hands, I know I can't see you as you're watching this, but let's be honest here. Who really thought that West Virginia would win this game? Probably not very many people. Even the most optimistic fans are probably going to be real with you and say, probably not in our favor today. And honestly, what I was just looking for in this game was just how competitive West Virginia would be. Folks, don't get this mixed up and say, the Gonzaga may not be maybe the team that you're accustomed to seeing. No, Gonzaga is a damn good basketball team. They beat Baylor, who's 8th in the country, 101-63. They just demolished Baylor. They beat Arizona State by 8 points, which is a pretty solid win. Nothing crazy there, but they beat San Diego State by 13 on the road, which is a pretty good win as well. And they believe this is one of the more talented teams that Mark Few's had at Gonzaga. I don't know if it'll end up being the best team that he's had, but just based on pure talent, this is one of the better teams that he's had. And for West Virginia fans, I mean, you know what they've played Gonzaga a new number of times over the last decade or so. And in a handful of those games, you felt like, man, like if West Virginia just didn't have this play happen or these two things happen, they may win the game. You think of the game in what was it, Columbus or Cleveland a few years ago. Things kind of unraveled there in the final minutes of the game. You go back to the tournament game in the Sweet 16, felt like you had a chance, couldn't get the shot off at the end of the buzzer. That would have, I believe, either won or took or made it a tied game at that point. But there's just been so many of these games against these guys at Gonzaga, and they've just fallen short. Not today. They scrapped, they clawed for 40 minutes and just continue to hang in there and compete right there with this team until they got to overtime. And my thoughts were, well, man, if this goes to overtime, this is not going to end well. More talented teams typically win the longer you play a game. And West Virginia, when you only have really a 7-man rotation, maybe even a 6-man rotation, especially today, only 6 guys saw double digits in terms of minutes. So when you really only played 6 guys, you threw KJ Tenner in there and Eduardo Andre. Probably would have played more if he had stayed out of foul trouble. But the fact that you were pretty strapped on depth and that you were able to go and just kind of dominate the overtime period and win against a top 5 team, that says a lot. It says a lot about the makeup of this team. It says a lot about Darren DeVries and his staff and the message that's being sent and received by this group. Massive win. I cannot understate it enough. As we've seen on the football side of things, right? These things don't come by very easy or very often. And to see this happen in game 5 of year 1 is just incredible. It's still early. I don't want to overreact and say this is, a team that's going to compete for a Big 12 title. They're going to be a team that is without a doubt going to the NCAA tournament. There's a lot of basketball that has to be played, but this is certainly a game where you can point back to potential here in a month or so and say this was the turning point. This was the moment of the season where things started to turn and shift in your favor. And I'll tell you what, and I tweeted about this on Twitter, I don't know, probably a couple minutes after the game. One of the hardest things to do in these MTEs is when you have a massive upset like this, to come back the very next day, not even 24 hours later, and win again. That's a very hard thing to do. Tomorrow you got Louisville in the semifinals, who they themselves pulled off an upset over number 14 Indiana. So you got two teams coming into this game that maybe they expected him to be there, but nobody really expected him to be there. Maybe they expected this matchup. I expected this matchup to be in the losers bracket, but here they are in the semifinals. So you got two teams that are just thrilled to be here and are coming off of big time wins. One of these teams has a chance to get on a red hot roll. If West Virginia is able to go and beat Louisville tomorrow, it's looking pretty good because you're going to have a chance to either beat Oklahoma or Providence. After that, in the championship round, I believe that's what the bracket is. I'll have to go back. Or Arizona and Davidson's also in there, so you're more than likely going to link up with Arizona if that's the case. Um, but either way, if you can find to get a way to get another win in this tournament, specifically speaking tomorrow, getting to that championship game, just getting there. I mean, man, that is one hell of a turnaround from what we just saw not very long ago when they were just atrociously bad at Pitt. Now that was a one off. I'm not going to say that this team was atrociously bad in the first four games. That's not accurate at all. But in that game against Pitt in the backyard brawl, they were absolutely flat. They did not look in sync offensively. They didn't run good stuff. They took bad shot selections. Tonight, that was the total opposite. They took decent care of the ball, probably still not up to Darren's standards. 13 turnovers, you forced 13 yourself. I just thought they ran really good stuff offensively, and they really kind of dictated the pace. Now, Gonzaga was still able to get out and run a little bit, but they don't they didn't get quite up to their tempo that I think that they were accustomed to playing. You could see, especially when West Virginia was getting down to the final 4 6 minutes of the game, and in overtime as well, they were taking their time, their jolly old time, just bringing the ball up the court, letting things just kind of settle down for a minute, catch their breath, run their offense, try and get a bucket or not, and then run back on defense, and then exert your energy there. And I thought it was a terrific game plan. Again, when you're working with a 6, 7 man rotation, you've got to kind of slow things down and play at your tempo. Don't be forcing yourself out of something because the other team's trying to dictate the game or the flow of the game. So tremendous stuff there. I'll look here at the numbers before we get out of here. Usually I do this at the beginning, but I got so caught up into talking about the actual game itself that we kind of skipped over that. So let's go and take a look here at some of the numbers from tonight's game. Amani Hansberry, I'm going to go ahead and mention because he's not here on this graphic, but how about this? A breakout game for him: 19 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 of 8 from three. Probably should have even had a fourth, one kind of rimmed out, but just a huge breakout game for him. Tucker DeVries, 16 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Took a little while for him to get going, but man, when he needed to make shots, he made them, especially at the free throw line at the end of regulation. Javon Small was the story of the day, though. 31 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. And for me, Javon is the X factor. I said this in my initial thoughts article. It's up on the website now if you want to read it more in depth and see some of my other thoughts and takeaways from the game. Go to the site and check it out. But Javon Small is the X factor for this team. Tucker DeVries may very well be the best player, but Javon is the X factor. And what I mean by that is he's the guy that's really going to take this thing to the next level if there is a next level for this team. If this is a tournament team, Javon Small has to show up and be the player that he was today. He doesn't have to score 31. But if he can get you 16 or 15 or 18 points a game, make plays for his teammates, play as well as he did on defense. I thought he played pretty solid defensively today. He was up in people's grills. He was playing 100 miles an hour. And that was one of the things I noticed early on in this game. Really, not just from him, the whole entire team. They were engaged, locked in, and playing extremely fast defensively. They were not late on rotations. They were communicating well. They had good help side defense. All of that did not exist in the game against Pitt. So, I mean, I don't want to be one of those guys that say, well, if you maybe played Pitt, in game 5 or 6, maybe things were differently, but I'm going to be that guy. I still think if you had a couple of more games before you played Pitt, um, maybe the outcome's differently. I don't know that the win loss result is differently, but I think you play a much more respectable, competitive game. But yeah, and I think too that was a great learning experience for West Virginia. You go on the road, kind of get, I wouldn't say humbled because you hadn't really gotten going at any point yet. You had only played 2 games, but it kind of brought you back down to earth a little bit and said, okay, this is a wake up call. We've got to fix this, this, and this, or else it's going to be a challenging year. And you go on the road, you play in a pretty decently tough environment, and you found out some things. You found some problems that you need to solve. You did that against Iona, and you turned that into a win against Gonzaga. I mean, just quite the turnaround. I mean, just unbelievable job again by Darren DeVries and this staff, this roster. Hats off to them. They'll take on again Louisville tomorrow in the semifinal round of the Battle for Atlantis. That will tip off at noon on ESPN on Thanksgiving Day. We will not have a post game show tomorrow. I'll be partaking in some Thanksgiving activities, as I'm sure as you will as well. But I will be watching the game. We'll have my initial thoughts up on the website. So if you want to check out my thoughts on the game, make sure you go to our website there. And then Friday, we will have a post game show, whether that's the championship game or a consolation game of some sort. We'll be there to recap that one here on the post game side as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you hit the subscribe button here on our YouTube page at West Virginia on SI. Give us a follow on X at SI_WVU. And we'll see you back here Friday to recap whatever game that the Mountaineers are playing in on Friday, on Black Friday, that is. So thank you for tuning in once again. West Virginia 86, Gonzaga 78.